أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد والثناء لله رب العالمين ثم الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا وعظيمنا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع نفوسنا بالقاسم المصطفى محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So this is the 8th lecture. My plan, inshallah, is to try and finish everything today so that we have more time for other things tomorrow, inshallah. And I think for some people it's quite clear the path that we've taken. For those who have followed it from start to finish, we've reached a certain stage where we've understood that our actions is not judged in such a simple way. There's many things that are taken into consideration. The last 2 lectures focused on an extremely important point, and that is our actions itself is not necessarily what is judged, but rather our submission, our obedience, our sincerity, and perhaps the level of sacrifice is what is considered by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we saw that there might be a correlation between the level of sacrifice that you make and the amount of reward that you get. So for example, with Nabi Ibrahim alayhi salam, we said that the level of sacrifice for him warranted a great reward. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted to test Ibrahim alayhi salam with giving him that highest rank of imamat, he tested him with the thing that is most dear to him to see what level of sacrifice is he willing to make. And he tested him with the most dearest thing, which was what? His son. So therefore, that sacrifice that he was willing to make, remember the action never actualized, it never became a reality. But Allah just wanted to see how far he would go with his level of submission and sacrifice. And everyone have their own Ismail alayhi salam. We all have our own particular sacrifices that we have to make, and everyone's test is different. Am I right? For example, for some people it might be patience. In their life, patience is their test, and they have to sacrifice a lot. For some people it might be their parents. It might be their parents in the sense of being good to them is their test. For some people it might be lowering their gaze. That is their great test and their great sacrifice that they have to make throughout their life. And that is what Allah, so for example, a very, 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 very simple example. In Karbala, the salah compared to my salah that I just did over here. Can we say that because both of them are salah, the reward is the same? Or can we say that that salah that was done in the middle of the battlefield with the fear that at any moment an arrow might come and pierce their skin or their heart, that prayer with that sacrifice that potentially their life might be taken, but I'm going to do it for the obedience and submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, can we say that the reward for that prayer is the same? Whereas me, I just want to get it over and done with, and alhamdulillah, I'm done, now I can relax. No, we say that perhaps there is a difference in reward. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Now before I continue on, there was a question, an important question that came yesterday at the end of my lecture, and they said, in this equation that you've brought forth about who goes to heaven, who goes to hell, the people in the middle, what about shafa'ah? What about intercession? Where is this in the equation? I didn't intend to talk about this, but I thought I'll just quickly try squeeze this in, inshallah. To summarize it, there's a narration in Ma'ani al-Akhbar for Shaykh al-Saduq, where a companion of Imam al-Sadiq asks him, tell me about death. What happens at death? The Imam said, at death, people will feel one of 3 things. For the believers, the ones that believe, that obey, that have not committed great sins, that are always in remembrance of Allah and so on and so forth, essentially the mu'mineen, they will feel a comfort and safety at the time of death. And they know that they will be going to heaven. Perhaps you will see some of our martyrs, they die with a smile on their face. Perhaps because they know where they're going. Then there's another group where they feel discomfort and they know that they are from the disbelievers, and they know at that point in death that their abode is the hellfire. Why? Because they were stubborn in their denial. Not because they didn't know or didn't recognize or didn't have the intellect to understand or comprehend, or the information didn't reach them. No, they know that they are of those people. Then the other group, which is the one that at the time of death, they feel a sense of uncertainty and fear. They don't know, are they going to be from this group or are they going to be from that group? So they feel discomfort. And this was basically, the reason why they felt this is described by the Imam for all those things that we spoke in the previous talks. I don't want to get into it again, inshallah, but if you have any questions and you haven't heard those lectures, they're on YouTube. They feel a sense of uncertainty. Then the Imam says, for these people, there is the potential of what? Intercession. Intercession, meaning on the day of judgment, perhaps the Prophet, peace be upon him, and his family, perhaps Imam Hussein alayhi salam, perhaps Fatima alayhi salam, will do intercession, and because of our love for them, they will enter us into heaven. Or perhaps they didn't know who Fatima was. They didn't know who Imam Hussein was, peace be upon them both. But because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that had that they known who they were, they would have loved them. Why? Because they love for the sake of Allah and hate for the sake of Allah. So therefore they will be eligible for intercession. Now, intercession might be different for some people, and for other people it might be similar. So for some people, perhaps they won't feel any punishment, and as soon as the day of judgment comes, they'll get that intercession and go there. Maybe because their good deeds and bad deeds are so similar, or perhaps they have more good deeds than bad deeds, they'll be allowed into heaven straight away. For some people, no, they might have some punishment for a certain period of time, and then the intercession will grant them paradise. And this is an important point. Why? Because the Imam recognized that what people will do is have that cognitive dissonance that we spoke about. If I'm from that group, I don't have to be a believer. I don't need to strive to be a believer. Why? Because if I know I'm going to get the intercession of Ahlul Bayt, I'm just going to start doing sins. Is that correct? Of course, we shouldn't be striving for this. We shouldn't be striving to be the middle group and hoping for the intercession. We should be striving to be believers where we don't need our intercession. In fact, the Imams, alayhim salam, they say that the best intercession is your good deeds. Don't depend on our intercession. Depend on your good deeds. Depend on the recitation of the Quran. Depend upon your salah. That's the best intercessor. So the Imam says to the companion, beware. Do not depend upon our intercession, and do not indulge yourself in sin and belittle the punishment of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because for some people, that shafa'ah won't benefit them maybe for 300,000 years. Now, you just put your hand over the stove right now, turned on. Let's see how long you can last. Imagine 300,000 years. We shouldn't be striving for that, brothers and sisters. We should be striving to be from the mu'mineen, where our deeds will be our greatest intercessor. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Now we can continue on, inshallah, with our talk. And of course, that was very relevant to our talk in any case. Now, I want to discuss the concept of crying, shedding tears, coming to the majalis of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, where there seems to be a notion that I am able to come here and immediately I am allowed to enter into paradise. All my sins are going to be wiped away. This was all this build up, these 9 nights, or these 8 nights, or 7 nights, whatever it's been, has been a build up to answer these questions. Now, to answer that, I want to give you a snapshot of another similar sort of a concept, and that is the concept of saying La ilaha illallah. La ilaha illallah, there's many narrations, meaning there is no God but Allah. there is many narrations that say, for example, that if anyone says La ilaha illallah, they will be granted and rewarded with paradise. And this has led a lot of people to say, see, all Muslims are going to be entering into heaven so long as they say La ilaha illallah. But then there's a problem, because there's a lot of other narrations that seem to contradict this, or at least add some extra information. For example, there's a narration that says that the one who says La ilaha illallah with sincerity and stays away from the forbidden act into heaven. Of course, this naturally is harmonious with the intellect. Why? It makes sense. There's no need for mental gymnastics to try and understand where the justice of Allah is in this. There's another narration, for example, that says, Imam al-Radha was asked about this narration. Whoever says La ilaha illallah enters into my fortress, into my protection. Allah is saying this, Hadith Qudsi. Whoever says La ilaha illallah enters into my protection. And whoever enters into my protection, he will enter into the hellfire and will be safe, enter into paradise and be safe from the hellfire. They asked the Imam this. He says, بِشُرُوطِهَا, with its conditions. وَأَنَا مِن شُرُوطِهَا. And I, meaning the recognition of my imamat and authority, is from the conditions. So now here we see various narrations speaking in a different tone. Why is it that in some narrations, accepting that this was narrated completely and fully by the narrators, why is there a difference? Sometimes it seems like it's absolute, sometimes there's conditions, sometimes it's this condition, sometimes it's that condition. Why? Many have said, no, we just bring them together and it means meaning you just have to be a Muslim. Be a Muslim, obey Allah, do good, avoid bad, and that's it. But this really diminishes the value of the narration, doesn't it? There is another interpretation. And this is the one that intellectually makes sense to me. This interpretation is, every time it was said, it had its own context. Example. Let's assume that this narration said by the Prophet in the absolute form, or seemingly absolute form, whoever says La ilaha illallah enters into heaven. Assuming that was said in the time of Mecca, the early days of Islam. Indeed, simply saying La ilaha illallah will enter you into heaven. Why?
Because there was only a few Muslims.
Ahsantum. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali.
Can the organizers sign this guy up for next Muharram? So, the time of Mecca, the sacrifice of saying La ilaha illallah is what? Your life. If we look at the first martyr in Islam, who was the first martyr? Sumayyah. A female was the first martyr of Islam. Sumayyah, may Allah be pleased with her, just for saying La ilaha illallah, it cost her her life. Why? Because the pagans and the polytheists and the enemies of Islam said, all you have to do, they were torturing her, all you have to do is say that there is no God but Lat and Uzza, for example. The demigods, the false gods. She refused and she said, La ilaha illallah. There is no God but Allah. She refused to bow down to what they were requesting. So what did it cost her? Her life. Now that sacrifice is what is important, not the dry words. The lip service is not what gets you paradise, but it's the sacrifice that you make. Now, in another time, perhaps later on in Medina, the Prophet would have said the same narration, but this was a different time. This time they could say La ilaha illallah comfortably. But what was the situation there? They were filled, the whole ummah was filled with, or mixed with, hypocrisy. There were the true believers, and there was some that saying La ilaha illallah, but in their heart was what? Nothing but hatred for the Muslims. So here he says that guarantee to enter into heaven is not just La ilaha illallah, but it has to be done with sincerity and avoiding the forbidden. In the time of Imam, for example, Imam al-Rida, there was huge politics surrounding imamate. So the condition for La ilaha illallah to be actualized was the acceptance of imamate. Because in the time of Al-Ma'mun and Bani Abbas, they were doing everything possible to destroy the concept of imamate because they knew how powerful it was. They knew what it was doing to revolt against the oppressive tyrants. So here what we understand from the narrations is perhaps there is a context to every narration that is said. And we have to look at the time and the place that it is said. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So now let's go to these narrations speaking about crying, shedding tears, the sha'air of Abu Abdullah alayhi salam. These slogans and symbols that remind us of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam. They guarantee us paradise. But question, do those narrations also come with a context, or is this absolute over all time and all places? There is an idea that heading towards the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein is greater than any other ziyarah, for example. Even Hajj, even the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. No problem. But there's also some narrations, for example, Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, he speaks about his father, Imam al-Rida. He says the best ziyarah is the ziyarah of my father, Imam al-Rida. Now here, a lot of try to pull left and right to reconcile between these. Now let's apply the same principle that we had before onto here. There is one more narration that I believe summarizes it in full. Imam al-Jawad, a companion came to him and he said to him, I am kind of higher, I'm in confusion and stuck as to whether I should do ziyarah of Abu Abdullah, Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, or your father, Imam al-Rida alayhi salam. Imam al-Jawad alayhi salam, he said, just stay here, and he walked away. He came out, he went out, he came back, you could tell he was distressed. He comes back with a tear in his eye, and he says, the zawar of Abu Abdullah, Imam al-Hussein, is plenty. There's so many visiting him. But the zawar of my father is so little. Meaning what? He's trying to push him towards the ziyarah of who? Imam al-Rida. Why? Because he was ghareeb at that time. He was a stranger. Now Al-Majlisi, the author of the Grand Encyclopedia of Hadith, 110 volumes, he tries to explain this. And he says, perhaps the meaning of these narrations that give elevation to the ziyarah of Imam al-Rida, despite so many elevating the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, he says that perhaps the meaning of this, in each time and each era, there is a particular imam that has a need for that ziyarah. And perhaps because of the less amount of people visiting that imam, the reward is higher. Why? To encourage them to go. So therefore the reward is higher to entice them to go. He says, and this was the time of Al-Majlisi, meaning the Safavid period, a long time ago. He says, if we look at the zuwar of Imam al-Hussein, people from all over the world are going. In fact, people who aren't even Shia, he says the mukhalifin, the ones who were opposing the imamate of Imam al-Hussein, now are visiting him. In fact, today, I got a video saying a pastor, meaning a Christian scholar, is visiting. We see Christians visiting Imam al-Hussein right now. In fact, what is the most, it's quoted to be said, that the biggest peaceful gathering in the world is what? Imam Hussein, Arba'in, Imam al-Hussein ziyarah. Now, if we apply this principle, and I'm saying the reward of ziyarat of Imam Hussein is grand, and inshallah it does grant us Jannah. But if we apply this principle and see who is being neglected as an imam in their ziyarah at this point in time, who is it? Perhaps the ziyarah of, for example, Samarra, of Askariyain, there is a great reward there. But now if somebody says, we want to go Samara, no, you shouldn't go. It's not safe there. Or perhaps it's Imam al-Sadiq. Maybe it's Imam al-Hassan. Maybe it's Jannatul Baqi in Medina. Wallah. For those who have been, they know what I'm talking about. But those who haven't been, when you just Google some images. Google the shrine of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and then Google the shrine of Imam al-Sadiq. You see that the shrine of Imam al-Hussein is like a palace. And he deserves that. And more, of course. But you go to Imam al-Sadiq, there's a rock painted on it, al-Sadiq. And you try and do ziyarah, what do? They start whacking you with a stick. They start interrogating you. They start saying that you're kuffar. Imam al-Sadiq is neglected. Imam al-Baqir is neglected. Imam al-Hassan is neglected. But where are the narrations? You say, what about the narrations? I tell you right now, at the time where the narrations were valid, there was no need to give people incentive to visit them because everyone was visiting them. But when Ali Saud, may Allah curse them, came, they demolished Jannatul Baqiyah and they said no one can do ziyarah anymore. Now, brothers and sisters, it doesn't matter that there's no narration. Find me a narration that says the reward of visiting Imam al-Sadiq, khalas. You won't find. Kamil al-Ziyarat, there's a book. 90% of it is the reward of visiting Imam al-Hussein. You won't find one for Imam al-Sadiq. Why? Not because there's no reward for visiting Imam al-Sadiq, but at that time the visitors of him was plenty. But today he's neglected, brothers and sisters. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
Now, there's more to this. I apologize if I'm getting quite emotional about this, but it is a topic of passion for myself. So inshallah I can get the message across without being too emotional and acting like it's a rant. But Al-Majlisi goes on and he says the visitors of Imam al-Hussein are plenty. But the visitors of, for example, this Imam or that Imam is little. And today, and I'm not saying today, for example, don't visit Imam Hussein, no, visit him. But understand that perhaps some other Imams deserve some sort of love from us, even if there's no written reward, because believe me, that ziyarah might grant you Jannah. It might grant you Jannah. Zain. Now we go to the narrations about, what about crying? You know, you're talking about ziyarah, but what about crying? What about chest beating? What about poetry? What about these majalis? Is that the same thing? So in Bahar al-Inwar, the one who did tahqiq of the popular 110 volumes, his name is Sheikh Muhammad Baqir al-Bahbudi. May Allah have mercy upon his purified soul. He says in commentary of the narrations of crying, he says, don't let it take you one way in thinking that you can do whatever you want just simply because you cry. Nor take it the other way and saying that this makes no sense, therefore these must be fabrications. No. Understand the context of these things. He says the time of these narrations was a time where crying for Imam al-Hussein, mentioning his name, doing poetry, having his majalis, was not just showing love for Imam al-Hussein, but it's also bara'ah, disassociation from the enemies. Why do you think that just mentioning the name in the time of Bani Umayyah, mentioning the name of Imam al-Hussein caused someone's blood to spill? Essentially, if you had a majlis of Abu Abdullah, your house afterwards would be flattened. If you were doing poetry for Imam al-Hussein, after you get off, people would be waiting out for you outside and take you, and you would never hear from that person again. Why? Because not only was it showing love to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, but it was also showing that you're disassociating from the oppressors. And they wanted to shut this up. Just like today, brothers and sisters, when we want to speak out, whether it's on social media, whether it's the media, whether it's on the pulpit, whatever it is, if it's something against the oppressors, they want to shut you up. Why? Because these things will cause a revolt against the oppressors, so they try and quiet you down. So crying, poetry, majalises, what did that cost you in the time of Imam al-Sadiq? In fact, Imam al-Sadiq, they used to come into his home when they heard the crying and lamenting and take people and capture them. The cost of their tears, the cost of these beautiful words of poetry was their life. And this was because that the oppressors, they were against the Quran, they were against the Sunnah. So the Imams, what they tried to do was they made these things lucrative. For example, Brother Ibrahim came and gave some poetry. If you look at the back of his book, it says the one that recites poetry, for Imam al-Hussein, his reward is paradise. And indeed, the reward is paradise. Especially for the one that cost him his life. Now, I'm not saying if somebody comes out here, he's not going to get rewarded. No, he'll get rewarded. May Allah amplify your reward. But can we compare the poetry and the majalis and the tears of today to the tears of the time of Imam al-Sadiq where it cost them their life? No. Is it the same? You know, people would come up here and give talks and do majalis, and me giving a talk right now. Now I have no fear of speaking. Alhamdulillah, we are blessed. We are sitting in a place where people are encouraging us to express ourselves, right? This place is owned by an organization where on Sundays, what do they have? They have church mass. Here they have a cross. They allow us to move the cross, have a majlis of Aba Abdullah, promote it on their Facebook page as well, with comfort. After I come off here, people send me messages and tell me, Jazakumullah khair, well done, you're doing so well, may Allah, and I say, Alhamdulillah, thank you. Some of us get paid, become pop stars, no problem. This is your prerogative as well. I have no problem with that. If somebody wants to get paid for this, that's fine. That's your prerogative and you deserve that. But don't think that you're going to be having the comfort of being paid and praised and think that you're going to get paradise, while the one over there did it purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, knowing that his life is going to be taken, potentially. You know, this majlis, can you compare it to Malaysia, for example? Yesterday, I was speaking about this topic with my wife. And my wife today sends me an article explaining that in Malaysia, they had a majlis for Abu Abdullah alayhi salam, and 23 afterwards were taken and arrested. Why? Because Sharia law, according to the Malaysian government, says that one cannot practice Shia Islam in this country. Allahu Akbar. While we are comfortable here and able to even have food and go outside and share it on Facebook and whatnot, while others are fearful of being in a majlis that they're going to be taken into jail and God knows what happens to them. Now remember, what was the principle we spoke about yesterday? Sacrifice. The greater the sacrifice, the greater the reward. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So Mutawakkil and Harun al-Rashid, they realized that the visiting of Imam al-Hussein, the ziyarah of Imam al-Hussein, was causing something in the hearts of the believers. The tears was causing something in the hearts of believers. So what did they try and do? Al-Mutawakkil went as far as destroying the shrine of Imam al-Hussein, similar to what they've done in Baqi'. Destroying, in fact, he made it into a pit, a ditch, and filled it with water, so that it can't even be reconstructed. Alhamdulillah, afterwards, when his son became the caliph, slowly it started being reconstructed and we have what it is today. But they tried to destroy it, brothers and sisters. It cost you a lot. And by the way, this doesn't mean just because it happened in that time, it can't happen here today. 20 years ago, when Saddam was in charge of Iraq, same thing. In Iran, when Shah was in charge 20 years ago, but can you compare the time of Saddam and the time of Shah to today, Iraq and Iran? No, but maybe soon enough the same thing will happen. It doesn't mean that that opportunity is gone. Now, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
This is what I mean by Imam, when the narration says the ship of Imam al-Hussein in comparison to the other A'immah is like it is wider and faster towards salvation. Why? Because the incident of Karbala and Ashura is something different to everything else, am I right? It's almost as if what happened in Karbala as an event, what happened before, during and after, you can capture it in one snapshot, put it in a time capsule, and place it in your heart, and make it relevant in all times and all ages. Am I right? The incident of Karbala has so many lessons and principles and morals that we can extract from it. When we talk about reviving the message of Imam al-Hussein, some people limit it to just poetry. Some people limit it to, for example, just beating your chest. Some say, no, we can expand that. But we expand it how? For example, tatbir and rolling in the mud and whatnot. And that is everyone's prerogative again. I'm not here to say that this is wrong and this is right. This is not my intention. My intention here is to say these principles that we've captured in Karbala, can we utilize them in a way that actually revives the message of Imam al-Hussein in our everyday life? I want to give you one example. I just need a drink of water because this is going to be a tough one. Sallu ala Muhammad wa
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
I thought about this quite a lot. And I thought the way of reviving the message of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam and the message of Karbala and the event of Ashura, what way can we do it? Or what way is it already happening? And should it be limited? And I thought about it. Sha'air, these slogans and symbols that remind us and bring us towards the mission of Imam al-Hussein, the mission of Sayyidah Zainab, can it be encapsulated in a way that's seen where a direct mirror of the principles over there is being shared over here? Is it possible or not? And I thought about, what is the sacrifice? What is the biggest sacrifices that we have to make here today, us in this room as a group? What sacrifices are we making? So that sacrifice can guarantee us Jannah. It might be just like the Mujahideen, the ones that fought alongside Imam al-Hussein, those 72. That action alone, that sacrifice alone, those tears shed for Imam al-Hussein in the time of Imam al-Sada guarantees paradise. Is there something that reflects that today, brothers and sisters? And I honestly thought about it, and I thought about what sacrifices are we making here in the comfort of this Western society? Is there anything that we're struggling with? And I honestly thought about it. And I thought that there is one struggle that I see within our ummah that perhaps isn't spoken about enough in a positive light. And it's a sensitive one. And I say this because honestly I'm fearful of mentioning it here, because perhaps it's not my place to speak about it. But I say this with full sincerity, full admiration, and full love, that the struggles that some of our sisters face in today's society, this battlefield that they're on, by emulating the hijab of Sayyidah Zainab alayhi salam and her family, I cannot see something comparable as much as this. Now, before anyone gets the idea, why are you speaking about this? Who are you to speak about this? Why is a man speaking about this? I say this with full love and full sincerity, without judgment. I'm not here to say you should be, for example, wearing the hijab and doing it for me and doing it for the sake of us lowering our gaze. No. This goes back to the original topic that I spoke about, and this is purely about the obedience and submission and sacrifice of Allah. I'm speaking to those that do a particular action purely for this reason, not for anyone else, not for your parents, not for society, not for what people are going to say, but purely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And I could not think of a thing more difficult in today's society than our sisters, our mothers, our aunties wearing the hijab. And I point my speech more to the brothers than the sisters. More to the brothers than the sisters. Because whenever we speak about hijab, usually, when it's especially from a man, it's about how they're doing it wrong and it has to be better. I'm not even talking, I'm in a different world right now. I'm talking about that struggle and sacrifice for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for the sake of upholding one of the most important principles and morals and ethics of Karbala and the incident of Karbala, and that's the hijab of Sayyida Zainab and her family, where the only thing left that they had after their belongings were looted, even the dead bodies, their rings and jewelry were looted, their tents were burned. The only thing left for Ali Muhammad was the women and their dignity, the women's and their scarves. Ibn Ziyad didn't even want to let them have that. Now this battlefield is happening today, where all odds are against our sisters who wear the hijab and do it purely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. All odds, whether it's in sometimes the home, whether it's in the workplace, whether it's just public transport. You know, in France, they're outlawing it. In public transport, wallah, when something happens on the news and, for example, a particular terrorist attack happens, we pray, Ya Allah, let it not be a Muslim. Ya Allah, let it not be Abdullah so-and-so. And that's just us men who then have to go and answer some questions at work. But our sisters, I can only imagine the fear that goes into their hearts, that when they go outside, those looks and what's going to happen and is somebody going to pull my scarf off? Honestly. And this battlefield, you know, the time of the war and the literal battlefield, that was for the men. Who was aiding and supporting us in healing our wounds, like the other day we spoke about? The sisters. Today's battlefield is not for us. Today's battlefield is for our sisters. And that's where we need to be the ones that support and assist them. Not to be another Ibn Ziyad and make it life hard for them, brothers and sisters. We need to be supporting them. Now what I'm saying is this hijab, that for some of our sisters that hold on to it or trying to at least begin or start or struggling with it, if you're struggling for the sake of Allah and sacrificing every element of your life, whether it's to even get a job or being insulted at university, whatever it is. I've seen it driving along, I've seen insults of my family. If you continue doing that for the sake of Allah and sacrificing for the sake of Allah, maybe it's that sacrifice that gets you into Jannah, bela hisab, without any accountability. That alone will get you into Jannah, maybe. And it's our time, brothers and sisters, to support them, especially the brothers. It's our time to support them. Now, inshallah, I'm not diminishing or belittling at all the sha'a'ir of Imam al-Hussein. I sit here and I attend the majlis. I come here, but these are not sacrifices to be comparable like the tears in the majalis of Abu Abdullah in the time of Imam al-Sadiq. Perhaps this is more comparable, because why? We're extracting the principle of sacrifice and what reminds us of Karbala to today. And perhaps that's what's going to enter us into Jannah, inshallah. Now, I think this was my final talk. If somebody has questions, if somebody disagrees with me, if somebody wants me to elaborate on something else, please put it in the question box. And I thank you so much for being an absolutely amazing support for me as well. You know, this is, you know, I walk off here feeling proud, but let's just spare a few moments to think about those who come in with fear into their majalis, like those 23 that were arrested and perhaps some of the people that come from countries like Saudi Arabia, Bahrain. Perhaps this is their first majlis that they're able to attend freely without fear. Let's spare a moment for those who are attending with fear that maybe 60%, 70% my life will be taken, but they're still willing to make that sacrifice. Let's remember them with Allah salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.